love this guy. I'm so excited he's speaking tonight. And with that, I'm going to give you Scott.
All right.
Hi everybody, Scott Trotter. I am an alcoholic. You know, I love the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love the people, and I always start off and say it has not always been like that. You know, I'd like to, what a wonderful weekend this has been so far, and the people that raise their hands, the new people, the people 6 days, 11 days, I remember what it was like with 11 days and making a decision that I didn't want to drink anymore. I was done. And then walking out the door and getting drunk anyway. You know, the big book refers to this as this type of thinking that when it's fully established in the alcoholic, he's probably placed himself beyond human aid, and that unless locked up, he may die or go permanently insane, and that's where I put myself. You know, I'd like to start out and tell you that you're never going to have a better sobriety date than the one you got, so you might as well keep it. You're never going to have the best story in AA, so you might as well keep that one too. Now, I didn't hear that when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous 49 years ago. You know, I saw a lot of people getting real nervous when I wasn't standing up with my amount of sobriety and they were pointing at me and stuff. And I like messing with people because I've been in meetings where I've get there to give a talk and they give out chips and medallions and stuff and they go down to 10 minutes and I took a 10-minute chip one day. And I was their speaker and they all said, oh, this is our speaker. You know, the book talks about my sponsor drilled into my head that outsiders are sometimes shocked when we burst into merriment over seemingly tragic experiences out of our past, but why shouldn't we laugh? We have recovered and been given the power to help others. You know, my story is not the story of drinking out of a brown paper bag at the age of 5, but I drank at a very young age. I'm from Boston, born and raised. Drinking age was 18. You know, I always hung around with older kids, and being Irish and Catholic in the neighborhood, it was real easy to get booze. And, you know, even 14 years old, drinking in the pubs, the Irish pub, Kelly's pub and stuff, you go, if you had money, they served you. And so I didn't grow 6 feet tall. Sometimes I hear people talk like that and their pimples fall off. They can talk to girls, and that's not my story. I really could just breathe because I was in a world I didn't belong, you know, and if you just leave me alone, I'm going to be okay. And I love it because when I finally read the book years later, when I finally took that prescription that's outlined in the book, it talks about that many of us will pursue these thoughts, this line of thinking into the gates of insanity or death. And I didn't know, even at a young age, I first got arrested when I was 13 years old, and I got sentenced to Alcoholics Anonymous. I had already been to Al-Anon, I had already been to Alateen, trying to learn about this illness. My dad being the alcoholic, the tornado roaring through the lives of others, the warped lives of blameless wives and children, the sweet relationships that get dead, and that was me in the 60s. I didn't understand what this disease was about, but the police were always at my house, waking up to screaming, my mom being bloodied and beat up. And, one time, I didn't talk too much about this in the past, but one time waking up to my mom, my older brother crying in the kitchen and going out, and this is the mid-60s, finding out that my dad had hit and killed a woman in a drunken blackout. And how do you process that stuff as a kid, you know? You just internalize everything. Being Irish and Catholic, you don't share feelings, you don't share emotions. You just keep everything inside, and you don't take your business on the street, because if you do, you're weak, and if you're weak, people are going to take advantage of you. So I learned at that young age just to keep everything inside me, everything. And it caused a lot of problems, because alcohol wasn't my problem. Alcohol was my solution. And I hope you understand that being in that fight for my life, I didn't know the price that alcohol was gonna cost me. I didn't know when I put alcohol in my body, I was trying to overcome an obsession I had no control over. That drink was going to demand another drink. We call it the allergy of the body coupled with the obsession of the mind, and that it affects us a few different ways: the spiritual, the physical, the mental. And so I had that false perception of reality right from the beginning. I believe I had a lot of the traits the selfishness and self-centeredness that we've heard so far this weekend, driven by the 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking. I make decisions based on me, which place me in the position to be hurt by you. I had a lot of that when I was a kid, before I actively started really going down the road of alcoholism. And so when I drank, the drinking was my solution to the world I didn't belong. Because those feelings and those emotions, when I drank, it made it okay. It made it okay, the abuse. It made it be okay. And I like it too, because I used to talk a lot. We've heard Bob and Jane talk a little bit about some of the things as a kid and some of the abuse and stuff. And I used to talk about that, and without really realizing that my dad was really doing the best he could with what he knew. I was never going to be like him either. And yet, when I look back on it, I became just like him. I remember as a kid sneaking out. I used to sneak out and go and drink and stuff, and got caught. And I came home from school one day, and my dad had my window sheet metaled and riveted. And he put me in my bedroom with a lock on the outside of the door with a milk jug with the top cut off. And he would let me out in the morning to go to school and lock me in at night. Now, today, you'd go to jail for stuff like that, okay? But at the time, I never thought of that as child abuse. I had uncles that were police officers and everything, and at the time, it was just, that was the price for getting caught. See, I was a hard kid to raise. I understood when Jane talked about being disrespectful to my parents and some of the antics that I would do. Horrible. I was such a horrible kid, the things I did to my parents and my family, and the fear that I instilled in them, thinking that it was their fault, that they didn't love me, okay? And then the thoughts of the aliens, I was on the wrong planet, and I should have been born in a different time. I was real delusional, and I started making the rounds of my friend Jim Buckley would talk about the homes of the bewildered, getting strapped to beds, getting pumped full of lithium, thorazine, chloral hydrate, Haldol, diagnosed suicidal, homicidal, manic depressive. Today they call it the bipolar, but not alcoholic. And I would laugh at that. See, because a lot of my behaviors were common manifestations of alcoholism. I was misdiagnosed, okay? See, what I am is an alcoholic. And those things that I did and those things that I portrayed to the psychiatrist when they would give me all these tests and ink blots and, what is this? And I'd say, oh, it's a battleship going down Hancock Street, blowing up houses on each side. And they'd be writing, and stuff. I didn't see that stuff, but I loved messing with them, okay? Because I would get more medication. And stuff. And so I would get out of DYS. It's called the Division of Youth Service. I don't know what they have here in Pennsylvania. It's kiddie jail. My first detox, I was actually 14 years old. 16, I was on Long Island Hospital, strapped to the beds, and with men 60 years old, 60 old people. I love it because I'm that age now, right? It's like they were old and they were dying, and I'm this kid in with them because they can't control me. And I would get out, and then I'd be in one more jackpot after another. In Alcoholics Anonymous, so constantly, because I got sentenced to AA. Now, this is when the second edition was around. They have a lot of different customs all over the country. Bill Wilson, one of our founders, had died. And so how they did it back then is they would interview you. So you guys at 11 days, you raise your hand. At the end of the meeting, we would come and talk to you to see if you belonged. And they would interview you, okay? And that happened to me at the Quincy Bay group, and they came up, all these old timers came up and started interviewing me to see if I belonged. And when I say the old timers, I'm talking about the guys with like 60 days sober, 90 days sober. Their sponsor said, go talk to this kid. And they came over and talked to me, and they basically precluded me from AA. They said I was more of the juvenile delinquent type, and that if I could learn to deal with my anger, I might be okay. I loved it because I used that excuse because, remember, chapter 3, more about alcoholism, talks about the experimentation of self-deception, that we will try to prove ourselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. And even at that young age, I kept going out there defending my right to drink. And the vicious cycle happened, in and out of one jackpot after another, jails, institutions, recovery homes that shave your head, make you wear dunce caps and stuff. And now, mind you, I never read the book, okay? I never heard about reading the book or working that program of action that's outlined in it, because where I went, meeting makers make it. Okay? That's what you do. You just don't drink and go to meetings. Meeting makers make it. But I was really paying the price, and I was really starting to have a price for my alcoholism. And I decided to do something different. One of the things I decided to do, I was 16 years old. I had been in AA for a few years at this point, and I decided I need a sponsor. Okay, because that's what I heard. You get yourself a sponsor. And so how it worked back then was, let's say I'm taking an anniversary tonight, and Chris is my sponsor. Chris would get up and he would have my medallion, and he would talk to you and tell you all about me. And then Chris would get up, I would get up and take the medallion and say a few words. And this guy got up and he said all this wonderful stuff about Fred. And Fred was like 33 years old. He was one of the youngest young persons in the young people's group. And he was getting a 4-year anniversary medallion. And so he had that. I'll never forget it, because he was looking at the medallion and he says, I was really nervous this morning when I woke up, because I knew I was going to have to get up here in front of all you people. So I smoked a joint to take the edge off. And he went on, and everybody clapped. And I got to tell you, I loved what Fred had to say. Right? That meeting got over. I went right up to Fred and asked him to be my sponsor. That was my first experience with sponsorship in Alcoholics Anonymous. I remember going over his house. He had the old octagon table, and he had the light fixture with the red, yellow, and green light things from back in the 60s and 70s. And he had the 12 and 12 out, and he had a bowl of weed, and he had just rolled a joint. And I sat down to start working the steps with him, and he passed me a joint. Well, if you're new and you're sitting here, make no mistake, Dr. Silkworth closes all those loopholes when he says that we can't take alcohol in any form, and the only treatment we have to offer is complete abstinence. Okay, that's a little marijuana maintenance, a little social heroin, a little rock cocaine, whatever your trip is, that's not sobriety. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't hear that at the time. You didn't talk about drugs from the podium, because this is Alcoholics Anonymous, and if you did talk about drugs from the podium, you were taken down. So the misconceptions that I had in Alcoholics Anonymous were tremendous. In the back of the book, it talks about this guy, Herbert Spencer, is credited with writing a thing that talks about that there's a principle that's a bar against all information, that's proof against all argument, that cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance, and that principle is contempt prior to investigation. I thought I knew what AA was. I thought I knew what AA was from my dad going, didn't work. From me going, didn't work, okay? I just did it because some of the things I learned later were people come into AA for a couple of reasons, and really only a couple of reasons. And one's for relief and one's for recovery. I was not looking for a 12-step solution to a soul sickness I didn't think I had. I just had some bad luck, okay? I just had some bad luck. And one day I'm going to do this, and one day I'm going to do that. And I don't blame some of the people the way they presented AA back in the 70s to me, because they didn't know. What were they taught? What was their sponsorship? What were they taught about that program of action that's outlined in the book? They weren't taught much, and I wonder how many people they actually killed. Again, what I came looking for, I came looking with, and I was not looking for that answer. I am sure that they talked about the big book. I am sure that they talked about the 12 steps in that program of action, but that's not what I heard. And people can't hear until they can hear, and they can't see until they can see, and I didn't see it, and I didn't hear it, and I had all these false misconceptions, and I kept using that as my right to go out there and drink. And I kept going out there to drink. It got real serious in the mid to late 70s with scared straight programs, the major penitentiaries where they'd try to, give me your shoes, I'm going to bend you over when I get you in there, right? They're trying to scare you straight. The problem is you can't scare a real alcoholic, okay? And they couldn't scare me. That didn't work. The suicide thoughts started coming a little bit, the depression. I love it when Bob talked about that depression, because people don't realize even our founder suffered from tremendous depression for about 12 years there. And he called it the long night of the dark soul. And my soul was really, really getting dark, where I started reaching this this place where I couldn't picture life with alcohol or without alcohol. The delusions that I started having that this is the only life that I knew, and it was never going to get any better, no matter what I did. And I got a girl pregnant. Okay, and you know, back then, what you did is they called them shotgun weddings. You got married and you moved down the street from your parents and you got a job at the factory, and I did. And it lasted 2 weeks, and she was home with her family, and I was in the combat zone. Anybody ever been to Boston in the 70s, the combat zone? Red light district, yeah. I found myself in the combat zone. We were rolling prostitutes, and if you don't know what that is, it's robbing them. And I got arrested for armed robbery, and I was an adult now. I was 18 years old. And I walked into that Charles Street jail. I'll never forget it. 5 Tiers, the oldest jail in New England. And I walked in there like that Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder movie, you know, Stir Crazy, that's right, we bad. And I walked in, and a guy got thrown off the 5th tier, and he got killed, and it scared me to death. You know, I had heard all the things that happen to cute little punks when they get you in there, and I was cute. I had long hair, and I was a little nervous. And come here, boy. Yeah, you with the tight jeans? No. You want to be the husband or the wife tonight? No. Right? I was really scared. But Massachusetts is a Commonwealth law state, and so you have the right to face your accuser. They don't show up 3 times in court. They dismiss it, lack of prosecution. And I was facing 8 to 10 years with this armed robbery charge. And so I ended up getting bailed out, and I went home to that dingy apartment, and I didn't want to live anymore. I just couldn't picture this life anymore, and I knew I was going to drink again. See, that's the sad part. Even coming into AA without the solution, without understanding what this whole deal was about, I knew I was doomed. Our book uses that terminology. I was doomed. I knew I was doomed. I knew I was going to drink again. And I'm a blackout drinker. Any blackout drinkers? Yeah. Any projectile pukers? But my sponsor Ted used to say that all the time. I loved it coming out. I loved it. You know, I could drink more. And I love it. My sponsor, fast forward real quick, he always used to talk. And you can't say certain words now in AA because of people's sensitivity. But he used to talk about cocaine, and he called it that faggot white powder, okay, and that he never did that, okay, and that you know, all men are the same with their inventories and stuff, but he could honestly say that I've never had sex with a man, and he would say that. And so I'm a quick study and I'm a quick thinker, and that meeting got over. I went right up to Ted. I said, now Ted, you told me you were a blackout drinker. He goes, I am. I said, well, how can you honestly say you've never had sex with a man? And he looked at me, he goes, you're right. Right? The next time he was speaking, it was the Antelope Valley Convention. And he gets up there and he's giving a talk, and he says he's a blackout drinker. He goes, and I remember waking up out of my blackout, and I reached next to me and I said, please let it be a woman this time. He had such a sense of humor, right? Because you don't know. We can make these judgments and stuff, and you don't know. But anyway, this is about me, not him. God. I wanted to die, but how to get the courage up to die? You know, I had all these diagnoses and stuff, and how do I do it? And I'm a good Catholic kid, so I didn't want to shoot myself. I didn't want to hang myself. I wanted the open casket so that they could all come by and say, oh, he was such a good kid and stuff. And so I got in the bathtub and I cut my wrist all the way down. I got 110 stitches in each arm. I shredded my veins, and that's how I bled out. And the next morning they found me in the bathtub. And I came to 5 days later on the critical list. And you hear people say the shame and the guilt, they can't even do that right. And I really felt that. It's like, I can't even do that right. Well, I ended up beating that case. And you think that would be a time for celebration, but I knew it was going to continue. And I didn't want to live like that anymore. And so I took 200 Nytal sleeping pills with a 6-pack of beer and stuck my head in the gas stove. And that's how I got found like that. And I came to in the hospital, and that one really scared me. I don't talk too much about that one either, but and I don't say this to jokingly and stuff, but I talk like this. I talked like that for 2 weeks because the gases and stuff had messed up my esophagus and my sinuses and stuff. And 2 weeks into it, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be doomed to talking like that for the rest of my life. And I came out of it. And I'm strapped to the bed at Medfield State Hospital, and this woman came and saw me, and she told me about this guy named Jesus Christ, that if I accepted him as my personal Savior, behold, everything would be new. And I don't know about you, but alcoholics are my type. We go from one extreme to the next. We're either really good or we're really bad. And I decided to be really good. And so I said, why not? This was a loving, caring God, not my judgment Catholic one that I was being cast into the lake of fire. So I accepted Christ as my personal Savior. And I went into a program called Teen Challenge. Okay, and some of you may have heard of Teen Challenge. And I quit smoking, swearing, watching TV, listening to rock and roll. I started going to Bible study 7 hours a day, church 7 days a week. I started traveling New England, giving my testimony how Christ has saved my life. You know, and I'm going into revivals and halls as big as this. And I entered the ministry. I was going to become a preacher, and I became a Bible thumper, and really studying the Bible. And I'm that square peg just trying to fit, and I would be in these rooms like this, and the revival would be going on, and people would be talking in tongues and passing out, and I'm that square peg just trying to fit, because these Christians had something I wanted. I didn't know what it was, but they had something that I wanted, and it was in the eyes, okay? And I liken it to some of these old-timers, you know, in AA that you see. You see that shit-eating grin they got, and they got something you want. You don't quite know what it is. Well, that's what these Christians had. And so, again, I'm a quick study, and I decided to be part of this. I'm going to get filled with the Spirit like they are, and I'm going to fall out. And I don't say this to disrespect them, the organization, or their spiritual experience, because that's what it was for them. For me, I'm acting. These were real experiences for them. But me, I'm an actor, and so I'd get filled with the Spirit, and I'd fall out, and I'm hurting my neck and my back. I'm getting hurt, right? These guys aren't getting hurt. I'm hurting. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm not going to do that anymore. Now, I'm 3 months into this program. I'm 3 months away from my solution, 3 months away from a drink, right? You hear terminology, stark raving sober. That's what I am. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to talk in tongues. Okay, so you gotta follow me here, because all of a sudden, I start making this stuff up. Okay, talking in tongues, and Brad over here starts interpreting what the Spirit's telling him that I'm saying. So I know he's full of crap, right? I know he's full of crap because I'm full of crap. And now in my mind, this whole thing's full of crap. Now I don't say those things, but that's all in my mind. And I woke up in the morning, and I had that moment of clarity that you hear about in AA. And my moment of clarity was, you know what, Scotty, you're still full of crap. That was my moment of clarity. And it's like, oh, man, I got to do something. And so, unbeknownst to me at the time, now remember, I still hadn't read the big book. I still hadn't done this program of action. But being in AA for all those years and listening to people, I had a little working knowledge of the program. And unbeknownst to me, the way the big book is written from the doctor's opinion to approximately page 63 deal with two things, and really only two things, and what they are conclusions of my mind. That I'm alcoholic, okay, that my life's unmanageable. Unmanageability simply means not achieving one's purpose, okay. I accept this into my innermost self. And then I come to believe that, not in, but that this power can restore me to sanity. I used to think it talked about the sanity of the world, when in actuality it's talking about the insanity of the first drink. When this mind convinces this mind to get loaded again, knowing I just cracked up the car, knowing I just got out of jail, knowing that she just left me, knowing I just got a restraining order, whatever the moment is, my mind convinces my mind to get loaded again. That's insane. So I didn't know the conclusions where this power is going to restore me to sanity, so I don't do that, so I don't get loaded. You know, making the decision to turn my will and my life, which is nothing more but my thoughts and my actions, over to this power. Okay, so just trying to connect the dots here, we heard the speakers, Jane and Bob, talking about some of this stuff, and I heard Dr. T-Bolt's name, and I always used to hear things in AA, like, you gotta hit your bottom, right, you know, and I don't know about you, but I would be sitting there, and my bottom always had that trap door. You hear people joke about that, but my bottom always had a trap door. Well, I didn't kill him. Well, this didn't happen. Well, that didn't happen. And I had confusions on what the bottom was. Dr. T-Bolt talks about that when he talks about really what happens to us is when our egos get deflated just enough, so that we can experience that spiritual experience. Some people call it a spiritual awakening, okay? That we can experience that sufficient enough for us to recover. That's really what the awakening or the experience is our egos getting deflated just enough so that whatever the moment is, the losing of the job, the way your kid looks at you, your husband, your wife, I don't want to live like this anymore, so what do I got to do? He went on to write that the problem, though, is that our egos have such a tremendous capacity for resurgence that we have to be constantly vigilant of this. See, I didn't know these things at the time, but I had concluded in my mind, I was screwed. I'm an alcoholic. I have a problem. I do believe. I made the decision to turn my thoughts and my action, my will and my life over to the power. It says that the main purpose is to show us precisely how to recover. That's through these 12 steps. The main object is to enable me to find the power that's going to solve my problem. I found the power. I made the decision. What I had never done, though, was made a thorough and fearless moral inventory of myself. Never. I was never going to tell some of the things I didn't like. I liken it to a cup of coffee here that's black. I drink it black. If you go to the sink over there and just drip cool water into it, when I'm done speaking, go look at it. It's going to be dark and dirty. It's going to be cloudy all inside. I didn't understand that the fourth and fifth step are designed to dump that so that maybe I can retain some of this good stuff that you're trying to teach me, that this power is trying to teach me, so that I can start looking at the character defects and the shortcomings to have them removed. See, I didn't know this stuff, but I knew fundamentally from being around AA that I had surrendered and I wanted to change. And I went to the director of the program and I said, I need to get some of this stuff out. Because see, what was inside me was like gangrene. And I knew if I didn't get it out, I was doomed. And he didn't want to hear it. See, remember, he's not an alcoholic. I had been forgiven through the power of Christ Jesus. Didn't I believe that? Yeah. You have the strength to face all conditions through the power of Christ Jesus. Don't you believe? Yeah. So now, what happens? What happens? And this is important because the 12 and 12 talks about this, that defiance is one of my chief character traits. See, and he's not listening to me. He's not understanding what I'm trying to do. And the defiance came up, and I told him what he could do with this program. And I walked away. And I walked away to the same acquaintances, the same friends with the firm conviction. I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm just going to smoke a little weed because that's not my problem, you know. That's natural. I'm going to smoke until I'm 85 on a rocking chair, right, in the front porch. Yeah. I didn't understand that I had heard a saying in 1972 that the man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, and the drink takes the man. And it was just a matter of time before that cotton mouth and a beer passed in front of me. I love it because years later when I read the book and did the deal, it talks about gin and sedatives. What is gin and sedatives? That's drugs and alcohol, right? That's the magic elixir. So I didn't know this unconsciously, but I was just like them. I was trying to find that balance, okay, so that I could function. You know, and different, Scott Redmond used to talk about it, that I overcame drinking by smoking weed. And then I overcame weed by taking pills. And then I overcame pills by doing a little cocaine. And then I overcame cocaine by heroin, right? And it used to go through that progression. And what I'm just trying to tell you is that I'm a garbage pail and I don't even know it. I don't even understand it because of the misconceptions I had on what we've heard this weekend on what an alcoholic is. And so I drink. I'm back in that bitter morass of self-pity one more time. And I tell this story to show the cunning, baffling, and powerfulness of alcoholism because November 14th, 1979, I'm on this bridge called the Bourne Bridge in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, going over the canal. And I pulled the car over and I climbed up, you know, and my life was at an end. I had restraining orders on me. My son was born. I couldn't see him. My wife was divorcing me. I got me on me and I can't get me off of me. That self-absorption, it's just there and I can't get me off me. And I'm filled with resentments. Latin word, base word, resentare, refill, rethink, replay, and that's what I'm doing on this bridge. I'm thinking about me. and all the woulda, coulda, shouldas. And I should have turned left when I turned right. Just all the things that could have been. And I'm so delusional on thinking of how the West was won in the Indian Sioux Chief, and today's a good day to die. You know, in Dillinger, I would have been a great gangster, right? I'm thinking all this weird stuff on this bridge, and I'm up there 4.5 hours. It's such a drama. And the Corps of Engineer and Coast Guard's down there with spotlights on me, and you know, the SWAT team's there, and every time they got close, I'd say, "Don't do it, I'll jump," and they'd back away, and I'd laugh. And underneath is this campground called the Bourne Scenic Park, and all the campers came out and set up lawn chairs and stuff, and they're yelling, excuse my profanity here, but they were yelling at me, "Jump, motherfucker, jump!" Right? And I'm looking down at them, and I'm going, "Oh my God, these guys are crazy. Don't they know if I jump, I'll die," right? That's what I'm thinking in my head. And I'm so very, very alone. So very alone. You know, it used to be talked around the rooms a lot that this was a disease of loneliness deep down that nothing can touch. It talks about in this chapter we've got in our book called The Keys to the Kingdom about that awful ache so deep in the heart of every alcoholic. And I had that. And I'm just so very alone up there. And I had that moment of clarity again. And my moment of clarity was honestly, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. There's got to be something out here I haven't done, right? So I made the conscious decision to get down. And this is where the cunning, baffling, and powerfulness of this disease jumped into my brain, because I had another thought, and it was an honest thought. And the thought that jumped into my brain was, you know what, Scotty, if you get down, you're going to look like a pussy to all these people that have waited all this time for you to jump. You got to jump. That's what my mind told me. So I turned and I jumped. Now, this is 169 feet in the air, okay? I don't remember hitting. They say I died. The only bone I broke was my sternum bone, my chest cavity, and that was from them giving me the pericardial dunk, bringing me back to life. They don't do that anymore because it caves in your chest and can kill you, right? So I'm in the hospital. I fast forward 2 quick stories, just real quick. Would have been about 22 years ago. I was giving a talk in Middleborough, Massachusetts, about 20 miles from this bridge, and my mom was still alive, one of my brothers was alive, a lot of family there, and I was giving an AA talk, and I talked about my experience with the bridge, and that meeting got over, and this was the guy, not me. He comes busting through the crowd, he's like, "Oh, I owe you an amends, I owe you an amends," and I looked at the guy and I said, I was living in California at the time. I go, "Dude," I go, "I don't even know you." He goes, "No, you wouldn't know me." He goes, "We were at the bar in Toby and came across the scanners that they had a jumper." He goes, "So we rolled some weed, got some Jack Daniels." He goes, "And that was me yelling at you to jump." He goes, "And you did, right?" And he was a sober member of AA. So probably 17 years ago or so, somewhere in that time frame, I was giving a talk in Palm Springs, Palm Desert, at the ABC Club. Keith Carpenter, some of you remember Keith and Sally Carpenter. So I was out there with Keith, and I told that story. And that meeting got over, and they did a receiving line. This guy in a suit and tie, real distinguished, he goes, "I always wondered what happened to you," right? And I looked at him, I go, "I'm sorry, sir, I don't know you." He goes, "No, you wouldn't know me." He goes, "I was the captain of the state police barracks in Buzzards Bay that called out all the rescue vehicles on you. I was a practicing alcoholic at the time." And he goes, "And I got like 20 years sober now," and it's like, oh my God, you know, you hear people joke, is that odd or is that God, right? Weird stuff happening. And 3 different people, 3 different walks of life, all sober members of AA at that event. But I'm here to tell you that I'm not done, because I'm no quitter, right? That did not stop me being in the hospital. I got out. What I need discipline. Real quick here, I lied. I came through this area, actually, Pennsylvania. It's a long story, but got picked up by a smuggler. He had black hash treated with opium from Peru that he had just smuggled in, gave me a big old ball of it for my trip to California. Never made it to California, made it as far as Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and I joined the United States Army. I came out of a blackout 3 days later. I'm in the Army. I'm at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, getting the crap beat out of me by a drill sergeant, not understanding, what did I do? So before my Army career was over, I was called down for the count trainer. I was on the Bettinghouse program of alcoholism, taking antabuse every morning in front of the CO. And almost 6 months into my career, they gave me a Chapter 5 honorable discharge, unfit for military life. And they kicked me out, and I was going to California, the land of golden opportunity, Hollywood, Beverly Hills. I'm going to go be discovered, sort of like Jane was saying with San Francisco, right? Well, I get out there. I was out there 6 days, and I came out of a blackout, and I was in LA County Jail. And I heard a saying real quick, and that's that you come on vacation and you leave on probation. And the only problem was they weren't letting me go. And before that whole ordeal was over between LA County, San Bernardino County, and Riverside County, I had 22 years sentencing in the state penitentiary in California. And there were only 11 institutions in California at that time. And those of you that have been in prison know that prison is nothing but a human kennel that breathes violence, and I let it breathe the violence in me. I became an absolute animal. I got tattoos all over my body. And all the things that you hear happen in there. I made it up to this institution called Tehachapi, and I got invited to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went. And I sat in the back with my Bonnaroos on and my bandana, and it was Southern California H&I Hospital and Institution, and it was a panel, and the guy got up, his name was Eddie Miracle. And he said, and I'm cynical, it's like, oh, that's a cute AA name. I don't know if you remember Eddie. I know Bob does. But Eddie Miracle got up, he said, if you're new, you come home. He said, you need never be alone again. You're like the prodigal son who had to venture out there, and now you're home. He started talking as this is a disease of perception, as our glasses being half empty or half full. He started saying that we're all children of God. He started talking about Chuck Chamberlain a lot. For me to love you for your color, you not for your color. There's no room for hypocrites in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Either we're all God's kids or none of us are. What was our choice? What was my choice going to be? And I'm simply telling you that he was speaking spiritual truths. And I believe that luck and chance was passing me by at that moment, at that time, at that exact moment, and I reached up and I grabbed onto it. And they ended the meeting, and I got to tell you this too, because the different customs. Now, remember, all through the 70s in AA in New England and Boston, they never read Chapter 5 from the Big Book on how it works. Chapter 3, more about alcoholism. They never read these things. So with Southern California H&I, because that's where it actually started, these customs were Southern California. And so it trickled into the meetings inside the walls. And for the first time, I was hearing those things out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that meeting got over, and they said, they did the vision for you. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to us. I'm not going to recite it to you, but I'm sitting there going, oh my God, this is so good. Where are they getting this stuff? And you hear people joke, but it's the truth. And for me, if you ever wanted to hide something from the alcoholic, put it in the Big Book, right? It was the least read book in the rooms where I came from. And so I jumped in AA like my very life depended on it, because it did. I worked all 12 steps inside the wall. I had that spiritual experience as a result of the steps, and I was free. Bob talked about the level 4 out in the shoe and stuff. I was free inside the walls. Even the fear of financial economic insecurity would leave us. I made 20 cents an hour, and for years. And long story, I got put on this camp crew because I went for this underwater. See, we only share like 3% of our stories, maybe 5% of our stories. There's a lot of stuff we leave out. And one of the things that I've left out naturally is I broke my neck twice, my C2 vertebrae, through drinking. And when I went for this underwater diving program with the California Correctional Department, I came in second and over all the institutions, and I got accepted into this underwater diving program that they had in Chino. And I was leaving for that. And when they reviewed my medical records, the day I was leaving, I lost my job in accounting and procurement in the administration, and I was due to leave. They stopped me from leaving, and they said that because of my prior neck injuries, I couldn't handle the pressures underneath in the ocean, that it could snap my neck. And so all of a sudden, now being self-supported through my own contributions, I'm without a job. They put me on this camp crew, and I'm up in Bear Valley Springs cutting trail through this campground, and there's this hill in the sun's coming up, and it's a tent trailer, and you could see two women in there, their outlines getting dressed, and you couldn't see them, but you could see the outlines. And I had been down for about 4 years at this time, and so I get up there, and I'm working, the door opens up, this young girl comes up, long dark hair, she's cute, and hey, how you doing, right? And she says, you think you can make any more noise? And slam the door. So I knew she wanted me, okay? She talked to me, okay? She looked at me, right? You know alcoholics, right? And so that night, I wrote a letter, and I snuck it out in my camp boot, okay? And I put it in the ladies' room. And when she came out that next day, I said, there's a letter over there. And what I said in the letter, I introduced myself, and I told her that I was a poor Bostonian, okay? That I had been down for a little over 4 years at that time, and I was wondering, I was on this program of rigorous honesty. I was a sober member of AA, and I was on this program of rigorous honesty, and I was just wondering if you could meet me in the bathroom for a quickie, okay? I said, there's no love involved in this. It's strictly lust, right? I did. I was perfectly honest. And so she got that letter, went in the camper, slammed the door, and never came out. And I'm thinking, oh my God, if she gives it to the cop, they rearrest me, they put me in the hole. It's all this stuff they do. And so she came out, and I said, I'm just kidding. She says, no, you're not. So I tried the next thing. Well, maybe we could be friends, right? So I'd like to introduce you to my wife, Kim, here. Okay? I don't get to tell that story too often, but yeah. And so, long story short, we started writing. I paroled. I was told I owed myself a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, not a weekend with her or anything else. I went to the Raptors. I went up there, Ted, Fran. I went to the San Fernando group, the Pacoima group, the Masonic Temple, Joe Gomez, Sonny Campbell. I'm with Doris, and I'm with Ted and Fran. It's funny because when I first met Ted, he had this big beard, and they called him Crazy Ted. And I walked in, and he hits the podium, and he said, the elevator to sobriety is broke. You must use the steps, right? You'd have to know Ted. And then he'd laugh. And he'd start laughing. People going, oh, my God, this guy's crazy. He later became my sponsor, but I'll tell you about that. So, and my very Monday night, I was at my first panel in Acton, California. And then I was at Warm Springs, and then I got my own panel at Tehachapi, and I became a product of H&I. And I worked all 12 steps. I became, for lack of a better term, what people call circuit speakers at the time, and I started traveling all over speaking at conferences and conventions. I got married, actually, at the Beaver Convention, came off the podium into the ceremony with 300 of the 5th chapter were there. Kim, Crazy, all these people, and that's how I began my walk in sobriety in Southern California. And all the dreams came true. Everything came true that you could possibly want. I started an attorney service in Los Angeles, and my wife was a paralegal and office manager of a law firm, and I started this attorney service. In my very first year, I did $17,000. I remember that distinctly. I've been 20 cents an hour for years. I made $17,000. My second year, I made $118,000. My third year, I made $265,000. Boom, 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 started going up. Bought a house in Valencia. Actually, Jim Buckley built it, okay, off Pamplinko and Seco. I joined that rock and roll band I always wanted to join. I became a lead singer of a couple different bands, one that some remember called the Go Cats, and really big in Southern California. Never made it big worldwide, but in California we were pretty big. And that money, property, and prestige, and Eddie Miracle was my sponsor, and I carried this message, the message of hope, the promise of the freedom of the bondage itself. And I worked the steps in order, like Ted had said. And I started learning about the program, and I started coming into AA, and I started judging, like Bob talked about. I started judging you. And it was little things like, oh, can't he come up with anything new? You know, he's a liar, he's cheating on his wife, right? Just these things. But I wouldn't say that. You know, I would just, keep coming back. The program works. And so now the band is going good and the businesses are going good. And Eddie died and I didn't get another sponsor because I know AA. You know, I got double-digit sobriety now, and I know the program. I know how this works. I'm sponsoring people. I got commitments. I got a home group. Rafters is my home group. All the deal. Circuit Speak. All the deal. And I bought a house in Cape Cod. Actually built a house on Cape Cod. My backyard was 300 acres of wildlife conservation. I moved Kim and a couple of the kids back there. And I was flying between LA and Boston 4 or 5 times a month, getting picked up by limousines, chauffeured wherever I wanted. I mean, this program really worked. You know, I had 13 cars after getting 20 cents an hour for years. Now I'm making more money you could shake a stick at and living the dream of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, you know, I really want to tell you that my story is not the story of Unhappily Ever After, okay? Because having had that spiritual experience or awakening, if you please, as the result of these steps, I'm here to tell you we work them in order, and I'm here also to tell you you can give them back in order, okay? Because all of a sudden I am not carrying this message. I'm carrying Scotty's message. Look at me. Look at where I came from. Look at me now. Me. All right, enough about me. Let's talk about you, Jay. What do you think about me? Right? That's how I'm sharing. Because it's all about me again. What about me? I gave the 12th step away. 11 steps, sought through prayer and meditation to improve this conscious contact with God. We become seekers here, and I'm not seeking anymore. I remember my first 5 years of sobriety, I got on my knees every morning and every night. I heard it described as humility, where we don't crawl before any man except for God, right, but we don't step on him either. Humble Tom from the Rafters used to talk about that. And all of a sudden, I'm not seeking. I'm not getting on my knees anymore. Why? Because you can talk to God anywhere. You can talk to him in the shower. You can talk to him when you're driving. You can talk to him at work. And that's all true. But that submission of getting on my knees was gone. Okay? And now I'm starting to take control again. Continue to take personal inventory. When we're wrong, promptly admit it. Francis, I owe you an amends. Francis would say, thanks, Scott. And then walk away, and I'd say, I owe you one. I'm not going to give you one. Mental masturbation up here, right? I'm playing words with the program now. I'm playing words with the big book. Sex. Let's talk about sex. Who are you to judge me? God's the arbiter of my sex conduct, right? That's what it says. You start hearing people talk like that from the podium, they're probably doing something they shouldn't be doing, and all of a sudden I'm doing and acting like things like a married man should do, and I'm killing my spirit, right? Killing myself. I'm never going to do that again. Getting up here, professing a belief in a system and a way out and a God that absolutely gives us everything, brings us back from the gates of insanity or death, gives us everything, and then walking out the door and doing something totally different. I call it practicing a program of hypocrisy, because that's what I'm doing. And then coming back in here smiling, because I'm not going to drink. I know I'm an alcoholic. I'm not going to get loaded. I know I have surrendered. I'm not going to get loaded. And I gave the steps back. Boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden, steps 6 and 7. Oh my God. 2 of the least understood steps in the whole program. Only 2 short paragraphs. Not connecting the dots of the 12 and 12 when it talks about all of them in conjunction, that the 12 steps are the set of principles that are spiritual in nature, that if I practice them as a way of life, it's going to expel the obsession and leave me, the sufferer, usefully and happily whole. I am not usefully and happily whole anymore. And I know it. And I know it. The insanity is starting to creep in. Make no mistake, it says we get insane and then get loaded. We don't get loaded, then get insane. The insanity returns first. And I know the insanity is coming back. And I don't connect the dots that this is the step that separates the men from the boys, the men being the perfect objective, which is of God, and then my objective. And I'm back into my objective one more time. And the bottom line here is I'm giving them back. And all of a sudden, in AA, we have a saying that we become as sick as our secrets. And I had a lot of secrets. And I back myself up right to that 3rd step where it talks about that the rest of my program depends upon how earnestly I do that and continue. Okay? My friend Lou Adler, I don't know if you remember Lou. Lou said to me one day, he says, Scotty, it's pretty hard for one God to recognize another God. Old timer. Think about that. And the insanity returned, and I drank. Yeah. And I remember, I don't really get into this too much, but words matter. Words have the power to heal, but they also have the power to kill. And I remember leaving the Rafters on a Friday night, and I drank. Rick Johnson came over. The next morning, they took me to the men's stag, and I was sitting at the men's stag. Please understand Bill's story. Bob calls him Wilson. Bill Wilson, his story. One who had thought so highly of himself. God, I can relate to that. These lames and these lops, and I know if you've been where I've been, and yet they're staying. And I'm sitting there, my hands shaking. I spilled coffee all over myself like I urinated myself. Okay, and I'm sitting there in complete despair. And Matt Schaefer, a good friend of mine, comes up to me, and Matt goes, "You drank last night?" And I go, "I did." He goes, "Did you smoke any weed?" And I go, "No." Did you do any cocaine? I go, "No." Did you do any heroin? And I go, "No." He goes, "And you're back already? Damn." And he walked away. And I'm sitting there, and when he walked away, honest to God, I thought, he's right. I haven't done any of that stuff in 12 years now. If I got to start again, he's right. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that took me out, ending to me losing everything I was a multi-millionaire at the time. I lost it all. Bitter divorce with Kim we were going through. Restraining orders on me. I was down to 119 pounds. Okay? Sucked up, doing all those outside issues that aren't outside issues, looking for the butch people because they're there, right? Going into AA, well-meaning, well-intentioned people. You done now? You got enough arrows in your ass now? Some of the sicker ones that I had sponsored for 25 years, Jim Finella. Jim says, Jim goes, "Oh, can I be your sponsor now?" Right? So these people know him, and I would say, no, Jim, and I would walk out the door and get drunk. I would walk out. I couldn't put together any sobriety. Any part that, and this is important, that leaves the physical out is incomplete. I never really thought about that. And I could never get that physical sobriety. That's why I understand about 11 days or 17 days, okay, and going out and getting drunk anyway. And the bottom line, through the restraining orders, losing everything, just the devastation. I was one of the guys that said I would never drink again. If I did, to drink would be to die, and I know that if I drank, I would die. I'm here to tell you, you might not die. You may have to live through that pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization again, tearing everybody's heart out again. And on Christmas night, in the depths of despair, one more time, 1996, I took a .25 automatic and I shot myself in the head. Oh. And the bullet went in here, blew the top of my head off, and I came to full life support systems at the Antelope Valley Medical Center. And I was in a tent, the catheter and all this stuff, breathing, and I looked down, and Kim was sitting down there. And I still drank after that. Can't scare a real alcoholic. Blotting things out to the bitter end. You know, for me, the best definition and the best way I can describe this is to speak about prison. And my friend Jim Buckley and I used to have advanced AA talks. That's what we called it. And if you can picture San Quentin Penitentiary and you can picture the gas chamber, and they're about to drop that pellet that gasses you when you die, and they drop the pellet. And I took a breath and I held it. Because I know to the depths of my soul that if I take a breath, I'm going to die. I know that. And I equally know if I never take another breath again, I'm going to die. I'm screwed. That's where I was at the end of my drinking. Okay? That's where the book refers to this blotting things out to the bitter end. And that's what I did. And this is where I joke sometimes that the state of California, my story gets a little crazy because I do. The state of California stepped in, they charged me with ex-felon with a gun for shooting myself. And before that whole ordeal was over, I'm in Chino State Prison and they're going to strike me out, giving me 25 to life. Okay? Now this was 24 years ago. And I had a thought, okay? And my thought was, I want to be sober now, right? I'll work the program now. I'll get a sponsor now, right? Okay? We become spiritual real quick when we go into those places, and I'm no different. I jumped in AA like my life depended on it, because it did. I knew how hard it was going to be for someone like me to come back. I immediately started working with other people. Some of you may know Mickey Bush. He sponsored this guy named Gary Green, and Gary was in the penitentiary with me this last time. Big Jewish guy, big Jewish guy. And he wanted to go through the steps. And now here I am doing the 25 to life. They're going to strike me out. And I've got him in the bathroom in the latrine. We're on our knees doing the third step prayer. I'm taking him through the steps. And the NLR comes riding up on, they're the Nazi lowriders, okay? Skinheads, part of the P9 Death Squad, which were public enemy number 1. And they were coming in to stab him, okay? They were going to take him out, okay? And they came running in, and I had done a lot of time. I got tattoos all over me, and the head of the NLR, his name was Joe, and I told him, not now. And they were standing there, they had the shivs and everything, and Gary's looking at him, he's on my inside, and I said, not now. And they turned and they walked out. They respected us on our knees in that third step because Joe had been exposed to Alcoholics Anonymous before. And Gary Green lived through that day, and he ended up getting out, and I saw him when he was out. I saw him in North Hollywood at your old guy Chuck Guerrero's meeting. And strange little situations like that, okay? But the bottom line here is that I didn't want to drink anymore. I had to get a primary purpose back, okay? I started praying that God removed everything I thought I knew about Alcoholics Anonymous, about you people, so that he could open me up for new experiences so that I could become teachable again, because I needed to become teachable again. And I started saying those prayers, and I got into a jackpot, and I ended up going into the hole for 28 days over on Palm Hall there, and I got a hold of a piece of paper and a pencil, and I wrote this thing. How many people have tried AA before? This is not your first time. Okay, how many people came to AA, got sober, and have stayed sober? See, that's how it's supposed to work, just in case you're wondering. I'm not one of them, right? But I knew how hard it was going to be. Every time I look at you, I think of, where were you in 69? Smoking dope and drinking wine, just an outlaw, right? She got sober in 1969. I do. That Jane's mother, sorry. My sponsor used to call that Arfy Darfy land. It tends to go sometimes, but I reel it back, okay? So I got a hold of this piece of paper and pencil, and I wrote this thing that when one who has wandered far into selfishness and self-centeredness seek to return to the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, he will encounter criticism and distrust. There will be those that whisper he's a newcomer again. Okay? When I started writing that, I had these thoughts in my mind on what Alcoholics Anonymous meant to me. Okay? And for someone that had displayed such terrible arrogance towards spiritual principles and these steps, coming back to reach my hand out, to accept help, to admit that I didn't know anything, and practice and apply these steps again, were going to kill me. Okay? And I knew for a lot of people that had been in AA how hard it was going to be for them to come back. And so I wrote this thing about, they're not doing the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, but their own selfish, self-centered interests. They seek to drive the returning member still farther from hope and from sobriety. Let the returning member contemplate the rejoicing in heaven over the return of the one that was lost. Let him in no way be disheartened by the suspicion and scorn of others. He can again walk in the sunlight of the Spirit. Because the feelings that I felt where this program was founded off the love and tolerance, not the judgment, condemnation we give each other around here sometimes, okay? Because we know, and we heard that this weekend, okay? about the judgments. And we try not to do that anymore. I remember many years ago when I shared that poem from a podium, Bob came up to me afterwards, and I thought he was going to like compliment me on that writing that I did. And he looked at me and goes, "That was so Al-Anonish." Okay. He got Bob, right? He did. And I guess it was. But if you've ever read Daniel and the Lion's Den, Peter sitting there, the light coming, the chains falling out, that's my story. October 7th, 1997, Judge Chelsea McCabe pulled me out of state prison, stood me in front of at a gallery full of people, letters everywhere. He's looking at me saying, "I don't understand this. You seem to have helped a lot of people. How could you do this to yourself?" He didn't understand the disease of alcoholism, how we can build this pretty picture, okay, to our wives, our husbands, our employees at this time different. Please give me another chance. I'm going to get sober. I'm going to do good. I mean it this time. We're such good con artists. They give us another chance, and then we get loaded and tear the house down. Okay? And if we're honest, we usually don't know why we do that. And that's what he didn't understand. But he took a motion from the district attorney. I choose to think that God had his hand in this because he struck 2 of my strikes and he released me the next day. And he released me with a 5-year tail. And I jumped into AA like my life absolutely depended on it, because it did. And I got a sponsor, Ted Summers. I went through the steps again. I worked the program as it's outlined with the amends, got down to the causes and conditions. My friend simplified it for me, Jim Buckley, where he said, "Scotty, for you, the cause is selfishness, and the condition is self-centeredness. From those 2 things stem all your spiritual illnesses. If you can remember that, you'll be okay." And I've never forgot that the cause is selfish. When the book says we got to get down to causes and conditions, the cause is selfishness and the condition is self-centeredness. From those 2 things stem all these things. So, my life changed. That's the bottom line. I reunited with my wife. She got pregnant again. She came to me 42 years old crying, had an early pregnancy test. That's Thomas. He's 23 now, almost 24. My life was a whirlwind. I decided not now to be what Scotty wanted me to be, because the book says, what would God have me be? To go where God wants me to go, say what God wants me to say, let the chips fall. Try to have that attitude. How can I help another human being? To have that singleness of purpose, the primary purpose, to be willing to take this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and cut a suit out that was going to fit me, because your suit might get me drunk. Okay? Phil Stone told me that. To take that big book and cut that suit out that was going to fit me. And understand that the practicing and the application of these steps were going to be a lifetime event for me. That I made this lifetime commitment now, one day at a time. And I have made a lifetime commitment. How I do it is one day at a time. I never knew what that one day at a time meant. I was in AA 42 years before I found it. And if you're wondering, it's in the 24-hour day book. I decided to read it. It's not conference approved, but it's still very applicable to us as sober members of AA. And in the very beginning of it, the first page is blank. You go through it. There's a writing from the Sanskrit. It's actually giving credit to the 4th Indian century playwright guy. And it says what our 24 hours is. And what it says is, look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the realities and varieties of existence, the bliss of growth, the splendor of action, the glory of power. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day, because that's what we got, the daily reprieve continued upon that maintenance of my spiritual condition. This big book is nothing more than a soft con, people. It's nothing more than the Bible written so that drunks can understand it. I'm talking about the spiritual aspect, not religion, not religious, okay? And what I've heard this weekend is all sprinkled through it is this program of action, okay? That's all it is a program of action. And I was in the penitentiary when Bill Sharp, he was an old convict, pardoned by John Kennedy. He stood there. Now, this is the penitentiary, and you're not supposed to have money. He said, do you guys know what that is? So I'll do it. Do you guys know what that is? I mean, you know what it is, right? Does anybody want it? Anybody? Yeah, a lot of you want it. You want it here? Yeah, he's waving his hand. Do you want it? Does anybody want this? You want it? She's smiling at me. Do you want it?
Is it a Jackson?
Yeah. Do you? Yeah. No. Yeah. You want it?
Two of them.
Two of them. Now that's a real alcoholic. Does anybody want this? Seriously.
We all want
Does anybody want it?
I'll take it.
Here.
I'll fall.
You'll fall?
Yeah.
There you go.
Thanks.
All right. So, believe it or not, that was a perfect demonstration of Alcoholics Anonymous right there. Okay, now I know what you're wondering. What? $20? What? See, we all knew what that was, right? Y'all knew. I can't think of a person that couldn't use that. Buy a cup of coffee, something to eat, right? Sort of like Alcoholics Anonymous. We know what these 12 steps and 12 traditions are if you're a real alcoholic. We know that there's a solution and that there's a way out that we can absolutely agree upon. We all knew what that was. But see, she had to get off her ass and get up here and get it. I wasn't going to give it to her. That's the program of action when we talk about the triangle and the service recovery unity and stuff. We have to get, as much as I would love to do it for you, and I would love to do, you got to do the work. What we learn here and what we learn to do through helping others is to lay the simple kit of spiritual tools at your feet. You need to pick them up. You need to do the work. It never worked for me until I did the work, until I started doing the whole thing. You know, when it talks about that rocket ship and being blasted, you know, into the fourth dimension there, that's in the rocket ship, not on it. If you're on it, you're going to get blown off, okay? And that's what always happened. I got blown off and left in the dust, okay? So a lot of things have happened to me, and I'm going to wrap this up. I don't even know what time it is. Francis is supposed to be giving me the sign. So one of the things through reassembling my family, I have had the opportunity, by doing the work, by sponsoring people, by having a home group and being accountable and suiting up and showing up, I've gone all over, not as much as Bob, but all over this world. You know, I've been with Bob actually in other countries and cruises and South America and just all sorts of things, okay? And that's not to impress you, but to impress upon you that no matter what your current situation is, you can become whatever you're capable of becoming as long as you're honest and willing enough to try this thing. And that's the key there, is becoming honest and willing enough to do the deal. And then you'll get it. So some of these things I'm just going to touch on is not to impress you, okay? Because the big conventions are great, you know, when you speak in front of, 11,000 people. The Gopher State Roundup, that was cool, right? 12,000 people. You do a Founders Day thing. You're with Clancy and you're with Bob and just the respect that's shown for some of the people that have given so much for Alcoholics Anonymous, and you get to be a part of that. To be able to be friends with Smitty, Bob Smith's son, that was the last living person when Henrietta Cyberling was there, and Ann and Bill and Bob, and to hear those stories about the stewed tomatoes and the sauerkraut. And I have a picture of him and I in my office, actually, just like right next to Jim Buckley. And those are all good. Those are all good things, okay? But see, going into Herkimer County Jail every month, going into Insight House, we have a panel in there, okay? McPike, okay? Going down to where the people are, okay? To become fishers of men. That's what Bob was referring to when he was talking about being a fisherman. To become fishers of men, to try to lay this on them, to get them on this path, and to give of oneself. I have been blessed beyond anything I could possibly imagine. My wife, Kim, and I'm talking about Congress and having breakfast as a guest of the Speaker of the House. I'm talking about the Vatican and taking my 5th anniversary over there and giving a talk at St. Paul's there. I mean, I have had the wildest things happen to me just by opening myself up to go where God wants me to go and just do what he wants me to do. And the blessings that I have to be able to throw that pebble in the pond and have it ripple out where you never know where it's going to touch. You never know where it's going to touch. to see the families resemble, to see that light come on in the newcomer, it's surely an experience you will not want to miss. I always talk about this when there's a lot of women, and there's a lot of women here, because it really struck me. In Fredericksburg, Virginia, it was a woman was taking a 30-year anniversary medallion. She was old, and she talked about what it was like growing up in the South, and she was a white woman, and she talked about having a mammy on the block, and mammy was a big black woman. And she talked about as being a little girl, and all the kids in the neighborhood would sit on Mammy's lap and rub Mammy's arm. And Mammy looked down at her. She was 5 years old, and she was rubbing her arm, and she said, child, my skin is as dark as the night, but my soul is as white as snow, just like yours. And she's this little 5-year-old girl, and she goes running away. 50 years later, in the grips of this disease, where it talks about waking up to the hideous four horsemen of the terror, the bewilderment, the frustration, and the despair, that's when we're coming out of it. That's not when we're in it. And she looked at her skin, and she remembered Mammy when she was 5 years old. And she said, my God, my skin is as white as the snow, but my soul is as dark as the night. Help me, Father. And he did. And she was getting a 30-year medallion. God does not make too hard of terms on us. Talks about that deep down in every one of us is the fundamental idea of God, may be obscured by calamity, pomp, the worship of other things, but it is here and it is only here that he may be found. It was so with us. Well, that's what it was with me. The good things happen. It rains on the just as well as the unjust. Bad things happen. We've had tragedies in our house, and death, and kids that get diagnosed with inoperable brain tumors, and then miraculously things go the right way, and we've had the good and the bad, and we've stayed sober and walked through it all. Not because we're any great people, we've just found a better way, and we stay out of our own way by trying to help other people. Kim came to me, would have been 10, 12 years ago, and she got asked through the community if she would run for judge. Okay, and so she actually got on the ballot to become a judge, and so she was elected as a judge. And she asked me how I felt about her being a judge, and I said, if you want to go for it, go for it. So she got elected as a judge, and then people started asking me, how do you feel about her being a judge? And I said, well, she's been judging me for 35 years. She's good at it, right? And so she became a judge, and wore that black robe and everything. Our sex life instantly got better. Okay? I probably shouldn't have said that. My daughter Kelly's here. Right? And then she had to resign from that, and she became another office, public official in the state, very high up there. And those are all blessings, absolute blessings. I got kids. I got 8 grandkids. These 2 that are sitting there, I got 5 grandkids from them. And I'm overpaid. I could have missed it. An old friend of mine named Norm Alpey talked about seconds and inches. Seconds and inches. I could have missed it. If I would have turned this way instead of that way. I have been blessed by, and hear me, and then I'm going to shut up. I have been around giants of Alcoholics Anonymous. Giants. And yet I still got drunk. See, the insanity, just because you're around us and I'm around you, doesn't guarantee that if I don't actually do it and be clean and be usefully and happily whole, I'm setting myself up. Dr. Bob talked about it as taking out insurance. I want insurance. Chuck Chamberlain used to talk about the ledger sheet that we're trying to balance, okay? All these different little things. And so I have to constantly, daily, live off today's sobriety. And if I take care of today, God takes care of the weeks, the months, and the years. I've been studying this. I like getting into thoughts and stuff, because it says we read other things. And there's this poem, and I don't know it all, but it's called The Laughing Heart, and it talks about don't let your life, it says, Your life is your life. Don't let your life be beat into dank submission. Be on the watch. The gods will offer you ways out. Know them, take them. There is light out there. It may not be much light, but it beats the darkness. Be on the watch. And it goes on, and it ends basically saying that you are marvelous and that the gods wait to delight in you. And I think that's what God wants to do. My sponsor really instilled on me that the only two words he ever heard God say was ha ha. Ha ha. You want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Thank you, Chris, for inviting me here. Thank you for this wonderful panel and the speakers here. When you get what you want and you struggle for self and the world makes you king for a day, just go to a mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't your father or mother or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The fellow whose verdict that counts most in your life is the one staring back from the glass. He's a fellow to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you clear up to the end. And you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test if the man in the glass is your friend. Some people may call you a straight-shooting chum and call you a wonderful guy, but the man in the glass says you're only a bum if you can't look him straight in the eye. You know, you may fool the whole world down the pathway of life and get pats on your back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartaches and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. I cheated myself for a long time, both in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't cheat myself anymore. This is the real deal. If you're an alcoholic, I'd like to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.
Thank you.